Where is my video link? There we go. Where's my phone? Should post this in my Facebook group. Okay, we gotta pull up the chat. Close that. Okay, good. It's done. Let's see, wait. It's not what I wanted. Oh well, alright. That's fine. Let's get the YouTube chat. This is quite the setup. Wow, okay, great. Can see it. Okay. And this up, and then this up. Nah, I can't have that up. Okay, that's fine. Just do this. Oh yeah, I gotta post on all my social media. Man, this one monitor stream. Heck. Alright. I need my phone. Okay. Whatever. Actually, we can do this real quick. Live reading of book, yes. That's what the people want. Alright, cool. Alright, here we go. Chapter 1. The Meritocratic Revolution. For virtually all of human history, income and industry have charted opposite courses. The poor worked immensely long and intensely hard. In 1800, the average English laborer worked 64 hours a week. In 1900, a typical American still worked 60 hours. And as late as the 1920s, blue-collar work weeks exceeded 50 hours. Virtually all these hours were drudgery and toil. The rising middle class would eventually temper both facets of working class labor and assimilate many workers, but it abandoned neither. The manufacturing jobs that once built a flourishing middle class absorbed and exhausted the workers who did them. The rich, by contrast, customarily led lives of extravagant and conspicuous leisure. High society, for centuries and even millennia, embraced elegant recreation, and the elite despised industry. Low wages consigned workers inescapably to modest incomes. No amount of industry could make a 19th century laborer even comfortably well off. You know what? I need to post in my Facebook group. Here. We'll copy the link location. Yeah. Here we go. Just need to make sure that people know. Low price of free. There we go. Nice. What's the third thing? Oh yeah, Facebook. That's right. Okay. Where was I? Low wages consigned workers to inescapably to modest incomes. No amount of industry could make a 19th century laborer even comfortably well off. And while the post-World War II boom allowed mid-20th century workers to earn their way into middle-class comfort, elite wealth remained flatly inaccessible. The rich, for their part, paid for leisure using incomes derived from land, factories, or other capital, which they generally inherited. Both the rich and the rest owed their circumstances to accidents of birth rather than choices or accomplishments. Long after formal titles of nobility had passed into neglect or even been abolished, Society remained, in effect, a hereditary aristocracy. You could learn how poor people were simply by asking how hard they worked. Today, unprecedented social and economic arrangements reverse these age-old associations. Middle-class jobs are disappearing, and the workers who for centuries pulled the economy's laboring oar work progressively less hard. The middle class is not idle, reluctant to work. Rather, it is increasingly idled, denied opportunities to work. Profound technological transformation eliminates middle-class jobs and renders mid-skilled labor surplus to economic requirements. Total work hours lost through these trends approach the difference between the hours. Are you in Bakersfield? Yes, that is correct. Total work hours lost through these trends approach the difference between the hours worked by men, also how you doing, Johan, and by women at mid-century. The new order, that is, suppresses working and middle-class employment today by about as much as sex discrimination suppressed women's employment 2 generations ago. This deprives the middle class of the income and status that industry confers. I'm okay, how are you? I'm doing great, just reading books on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. What's the latest book you've read, Johan? Do you read? Maybe it's this book that I'm reading right now. The new technologies do not eliminate work altogether. To the contrary, they actually increase the demand for super-skilled elite labor. The once leisured rich, in a stark contrast to the middle class, work harder than they ever have before, harder than the rest of society, and absolutely very hard. Prime-aged adults, men and women combined, with a BA or more education are less than half as likely to have abandoned the workforce than their counterparts with a high school degree or less. I read mostly fiction. Ooh. What's the latest fiction you've read? Moreover, when they are employed, elites work substantially longer hours than their middle-class counterparts. Last book I read, The Dresden Files. Ooh, I've heard good things about that book. Highly recommend if you're interested in the genre. What genre is that? I've heard of that book, but I haven't researched it much. And they enjoy less leisure. Indeed, despite pervasive use of labor-saving household appliances, elites actually enjoy less leisure today than they did at mid-century. Fantasy, mystery, urban fiction. Wow, that's highly specific. Sounds cool. It's Day 9's favorite book series. Ah, that's why I've heard of it before. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. I will check that out. I started reading it because he raves about him. True, even I remember that once you reminded me. Maybe I should read that on stream. Elite values, or maybe I'll invite you to read it on stream. Ooh. Elite values and customs have adapted to suit these new facts. High society has reversed course. Now it valorizes industry and despises leisure. As every rich person knows, when an acquaintance asks, "How are you?" the correct answer is, "So busy." The old leisure class would have thought this a humiliating admission. The working rich boast that they are in demand. This book reminds me of when I read The Prince by Machiavelli. Wow. I have not read that, but I've read the Wikipedia article of it. Maybe I should read that on stream too. Ooh. This is now a Reading Rainbow stream. That should be the title of my book. It's very boring, classic. But hey, my book club voted for this book, so that shows you how fun my book club is. The working rich boast that just kidding, book club, you guys are awesome. The working rich boast that they are in demand. A revolution in wages completes the new work order. Middle class jobs still cannot make a person rich. You know what? I'm going to do a 1.5 times reading speed. But the elite intense industry now generates colossal incomes. Top jobs commonly pay annual wages of $500,000, $1 million, or even $5 million, and a few pay $10 million, $100 million, or even $1 billion. Wow, money figures. This book is way less boring now. Indeed, rich people today owe the bulk of their incomes to their labor, and work has become the dominant path to wealth. Moreover, elites get these high-paying jobs based on immense skill, won through rigorous training, and they keep their jobs through intense, competitive, and enormously productive industry. Today, asking how long people have studied and how hard they work reveals not how poor they are, but how rich. I bet The Prince is very boring. This one you're reading is a banger. Oh, you're absolutely right, Johan. In fact, for that comment, I'm gonna mod you, Yo-Yan. Yo-Yo-Han. There we go. Enjoy your privileges. This new regime radically transforms who gets and stays ahead. God bless. The new order rejects the aristocratic hierarchy that dominated the old. You know, I'm going to refresh my Facebook page because I'm almost certain that, okay, nobody's commented on this boring reading stream. All right, there you go. There you have it. Nobody likes to read in the 21st century. And they keep their jobs through intense, competitive, and enormously productive industry. Today, asking how long people have studied. Okay, I've read that already. This new regime radically transforms who gets and stays ahead. New order rejects the aristocratic hierarchy that dominated the old. Instead, it embraces the meritocratic idea that economic and social advantages should track not breeding, but rather ability, effort. I rubbed it in Anini's face. Don't make her a mod, please. Ooh, I can't make this relationship I can't make you have power over her. That's not right. It's all about equality. Where is Anita? Is she in the chat right now? If you are, if you just type something, I can mod you right now. Or maybe I should just demod Johan. Anita just told me. She doesn't like being mod. Okay, alright. In that case, you can stay being well, she's a sub. How is she sub? How is my sole moderator not subbed? I see that Twitch Prime tag. Anita Shule. That's right. Look at that star next to her name. She said only men should be mods. Very anti-feminist of her. I just modded Anita. Alright, where was I? Instead, the new order rejects the aristocratic hierarchy that dominated the old. Instead, it embraces the meritocratic idea that economic and social advantages should track not breeding, but rather ability, effort, and output, and that all three must be proved by success in ongoing competition, first in school and then at work. Once, a leisured elite dominated and exploited a subordinate working class. Labor, moreover, constituted subordination for slaves, for serfs, for indentured servants, and even for industrial workers, whose labor movement reclaimed an indignity as a marker of pride. Now the industrious rich dominate the rest. The leisured aristocracy that for millennia monopolized income and status has ceded the field to a new elite constituted through industry, not a sub, but a superordinate working class. The meritocratic elite that this regime establishes is composed of a core that captures the incomes just described, perhaps 1% of households, and a larger penumbra that works in the social and economic orbit of these incomes, perhaps another 5 or 10%. Meritocracy constructs this elite through two movements. Each involves a contest or tournament. Together, they build and then set the meritocracy trap. First, meritocracy transforms education into a rigorous and intense contest to join the elite. It concentrates training in this narrow, super-educated caste that wins the competition for places and grades at the top schools and universities. Second, meritocracy transforms work to create the immensely demanding and enormously lucrative jobs that sustain the elite. It fetishizes skill, centering both industry and pay around a narrow caste of superordinate workers. Forgot to ask how you are, Anita. How you doing? Both faces of meritocracy, elite education's intense and competitive training, and elite work's immense industry and outsized rewards, have become so ingrained that they seem natural and even inevitable. It is difficult to imagine life without them, but both faces, in fact, are strikingly new. Anita says she's good. That's good. You guys both, you're over right now? You are visiting? Maybe that's the right word. How's Yishi? She's good. She's doing her homework for her class. It's pretty stressful. Very stressful, she says. Is she in Beko? Yes. Do you want to say hi? She says hi. Story of their rise opens a window into the meritocratic machine. A close study of their reign exposes meritocracy's discontents. Discontents? I think that's how you pronounce that. Meritocratic training. Elite education used to be anything but intense. For much of the 20th century through the late 1950s, how is Bakersfield? Are people pissed because of Trump? I don't know. I don't really go outside, so I don't really know. But on Facebook, there were a lot of people, maybe not a lot, but there were Bakersfield friends who were posting like, you know, that typing error or that input error with the graph going straight up for Joe Biden. People were posting about that. People are also posting about how, and all of this is like either doesn't have context or it's just false information. Another one was a video of somebody burning ballots. That was proved to be false. So I think, if anything, Bakersfield is highly into, those kind of narratives. So it was interesting to see it on Facebook. But I haven't really been in contact with people in real life for a while. For much of the 20th century through the 1950s, are people celebrating in the Bay right now? Is that what's going on? I see a lot of friends celebrating as well on Facebook. I don't know how accurate that is or representative that is of reality. Elite universities overwhelmingly awarded places. Apparently yesterday was lit in SF. Do you think lots of activities in the Castro? Do you think that would contribute to coronavirus cases? That's what I'm worried about. And it is outside, so it should be better, but I don't know if that matters, if the density of people is that high. Elite universities overwhelmingly awarded places based on breeding rather than merit. The Ivy League did not admit nor even pursue the best and brightest, so much as sustain and burnish the social patina of America's leading families. Sure, numbers will go after yesterday, but can you blame them? This is the best news of the year, lol. Well, yeah. I just think that celebrating good news, any actions that could lead to more deaths seems like a bad idea to me, but I guess I can't blame them, so to say. Even graduate and professional schools selected their students by astonishingly casual means. I, of course, agree with you. That's a relief. But I just don't know how many people agree with us. Super spreaders are bad no matter what. I agree. If only there was a way to stop the flow of the pandemic. Thinking emoji. Even graduates, a mid-century graduate of Yale Law School, for example, recently told an oral historian that he came to Yale after Jack Tate, then dean of admissions, told him at a college fair straight away and on the basis of a single conversation, "You'll get in if you apply." Things began to change in the middle of the 20th century. Presidents James Bryant Conant at Harvard and slightly later Kingman Brewster at Yale, seeking to open up, expand, and energize the American elite, expressly rejected aristocratic exclusion and rebuilt college admissions to emphasize achievement rather than breeding. By 1970, the cordial alliances among established families, schools, and colleges that long sustained a genteel elite had all been broken. Heh, this isn't coding. What have you done to Blue 2? Well, if you really... Let me just pull out some code so that, you can be happy with... There. Look, I'm coding. Here, let's change this to 10. Wow. Let's change this back to 1. Wow. I just coded. Wow. Proof that I'm Blue 2. You don't have to believe this, though. It could be fake news, as they say. Fierce rivalry now determines who attends America's best universities. The change, moreover, rang in a revolution, difference of kind rather than just degree, has transformed the basic character of elite education. Admissions officers have exchanged casual assessments and social suitability for intensive and rigorous talent screening, and applicants have exchanged family traditions favoring one or another college for a cold-blooded pursuit of status as measured by university rankings. The earlier example illustrates the transformation. Over 50,000 candidates a year now apply to American law schools, and perhaps 3,000 of these apply to Yale, the top-ranked school. Chat, are you guys part of the elite, the meritocratic elite? Are you part of the problem? Did I disconnect?
Yes, see that one?
Which one?
You one you just plug in.
Oh, sorry. The screen, right? My bad. My bad. Here, I'll put this away from my feet. Then I won't unplug it. My bad. The change, moreover, rang in a revolution, a difference of kind rather than just degree. Admissions officers have exchanged casual assessments of social suitability for intensive and rigorous talent screening. Okay, I read that already. The earlier example illustrates the transformation. Over 50,000 candidates a year now apply to American law schools. I read that already. Yale Law School now takes admissions anything but casually. 3 faculty members independently evaluate each file. And following this process, Yale admits about 8% of applicants, making the admissions competition 4 times as intense today as it was at mid-century. Median admitted students received an 8 average in college and scored above the 99th percentile on the law school admissions test, LSAT. Finally, applicants almost slavishly esteem status and enroll in the highest ranked school that admits them. Roughly 80% of those whom Yale admits eventually enroll. Yale Law School may present an extreme case, but it is not distinctive. Broadening the field leaves the pattern intact, indeed unaltered. The top 5 law schools, Yale, Stanford, Harvard, Chicago, and Columbia, collectively admit about 15% of applicants. The median students at all 5 had A averages in college and LSAT scores in the top 3%, and although precise and definitive data are not available, a reasonable estimate suggests that of the roughly 2,000 people admitted to these schools each year, no more than 5, which is to say effectively none, attend a school outside the top 10. The law school's admission competition does not represent an aberration or isolated moment in an elite student's life. Rather, the top law school adds the final link in the long chain of rigorous schooling. Students at elite professional schools overwhelmingly earned their A grades at highly selective colleges. The admissions competition for places at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Stanford is 3 times as intense today as it was just 20 years ago. Moreover, students at these elite colleges disproportionately attended highly competitive high schools, and indeed highly selective elementary schools, and even preschools. Whoa. Imagine competing for a spot in a preschool. That's something else. In other words, to secure a really elite education, a student must rank among the top fraction of a percent in a massive, multi-stage meritocratic tournament, one in which the competitors at every stage conspicuously agree about which schools constitute the biggest prize. Every one of these schools, all along the chain, offers intensive training commensurate to its elite status. Top schools, that is all, make immense investments in their students' educations. Elite private schools spend as much as $75,000 per student per year, more than 6 times the national public school average. And elite colleges and graduate schools spend over $90,000 per student per year. Total excess investment that an elite education represents, over and above the investments made in middle-class schooling, amounts to millions of dollars. Education works, and these enormous investments pay off. Study and testing foster diligence and ambition, and training builds skills. Harvard Law School's dean welcomes incoming students with the promise that no law school better prepares lawyers, public servants, and leaders for a changing world. And at Yale Law School, a recent dean told each graduating class that they were, quite simply, the finest new law graduates on the planet. These claims might appear boastful and even narcissistic, but astonishingly, the claims assert concrete, determinate, and determinable facts, which are proved in the two-sided admissions competition for places and students. Demonstrating these facts has dominated elite students' entire lives. For nearly 3 decades, Yale Law School graduates, and indeed graduates of every top college and professional school in every field, have studied, worked, practiced, and drilled. They have been continually inspected, and finally, they have been selected. This, after all, is what it means to join the meritocratic elite. The lifelong education that culminates in an elite advanced degree, and also the competition to get the training and obtain the degree, have never been as intense as they are today. Finishing schools that certified breeding and polished manners have transformed into rigorous training centers that select for accomplishment and build skills. An elite degree therefore represents relentlessly demanding, ambitious, and successful training. And no prior elite has ever been as capable or as industrious as the meritocratic elite that such training produces. None comes close. Meritocratic work. Meritocratic work extends the patterns of meritocratic education through adult life. Elite jobs mirror the intensity and competitiveness of elite schools and fetishize the skills.
Book club.
We don't have a boot club meeting tonight. It's the first Saturday of December.
Is that okay? You help me do something.
Oh, you need help?
I need help.
How can I help you?
I don't know where I'm heading to.
What is your problem? Let's start by identifying the issue. Super basic. What's the issue?
CSS grid.
Huh?
CSS
CSS
grid.
grid. I don't. Okay. What about the CSS grid? Complete guide to the grid. CSS tricks. Our comprehensive guide to CSS grid, focusing on all the settings for both grid parent container. You seen that before? Okay.
Yeah.
What's your issue?
My issue is like here. Let me show you. So this is what I'm trying to do. If honestly, if I put it in all together, same size, it will be easier. But now my design was like this one and this one and this one and this one.
They're not the same
So
size.
they're not really aligned with each other.
So do you want to just align them or what?
So this is my design and this is what I'm doing right now. And then so see this one cannot really. I want to move this, go up here a little bit.
You want to move what to go up?
Just let's see current right now here. I want to move this to here. Move this.
I see. I see.
But,
Well, it's not. So you want to go outside the bounds of the grid? I see. So you want to modify the grid. So modify CSS grid. Modify CSS grid. Changing grid layout, changing column width. Well, I guess we're not trying to change the column width. Let's see. Move CSS element up. Can you, so are you trying to, so maybe you can see if, here, I'll send it to you on Messenger. Maybe you can see if this will help you move an element up. Modify CSS grid. Basic concepts of grid layout. Flexible and flexible track sizes. Okay, alignment control. That's what we were on, right? Alignment control. How do the items align? Okay. So how do you align? Let's see. Placed into a grid. Okay. Maybe check this. There's a alignment control. Can take a look at that. Let me know if that helps.
Where are you sending me?
Messenger. Elites' work habits, the rhythms of a... Okay. Let's start here. Meritocratic work extends the patterns of meritocratic education through adult life. Elite jobs mirror the intensity and competitiveness of elite schools and fetishize the skills that these schools provide. At the same time, the income and status of the top jobs bestow on superordinate workers match the labor effort these jobs require. Both the demands and the rewards of elite work are greater today than they ever have been before. The elite's work habits, the rhythms of a rich person's day, were once as relaxed as elite schooling. This was no accident. The aristocrats possessed few special abilities and no taste for industry. They therefore lacked both the means and the motive to take over work. So the mid-century economic order naturally and even necessarily put middle-class workers at the charismatic center of making and selling things, and also of financing and managing the firms that made and sold them. Mid-skilled, middle-class labor dominated virtually all sectors of the mid-century economy. Mid-skilled industrial workers famously dominated manufacturing. Mid-skilled local independent merchants dominated retail. Mid-skilled community bankers, loan officers, and stockbrokers dominated finance. And mid-skilled middle and line managers dominated the administration of virtually all American firms. The old aristocracy instinctively ceded the labor market to the middle class. A leisured elite invited middle-class industry. No longer. While aristocrats naturally gave work over to the middle class, meritocracy's superordinate workers possessed both the skills and the inclination to work industriously. They unsurprisingly attract economic attention. Over the past 40 years, computers, robots, and other new technologies have changed how goods are made and services delivered. These disruptive technologies, invented by interested innovators and tailored to suit skills that meritocratic education makes newly available, shift the center of production away from mid-skilled and towards super-skilled labor. Automated industrial robots, for example, replace mid-skilled manufacturing workers with super-skilled workers who design and program the robots. Innovations in distribution, warehousing, and e-commerce displace middle-class independent merchants with subordinate Walmart greeters and Amazon warehouse workers at the bottom, and super-rich owners of megastores, including the world's richest family, the Waltons of Walmart, and the world's richest person, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, at the very top. Derivatives and other new financial technologies allow elite workers on Wall Street to dispense with middle-class community bankers, loan officers, and stockbrokers. And new management techniques allow top executives and CEOs to discard middle and line managers and to exert immense powers directly to organize and control production workers. These and countless other parallel innovations simultaneously exclude middle-class workers, whose skills they render superfluous, and elevate elite workers, whose skills they make economically essential. Collectively, they displace work away from the middle class and onto the elite to create the superordinate working class. Today's lawyers illustrate and document these patterns. In 1962, when elite lawyers earned a third of what they do today, the American Bar Association could confidently declare that there are approximately 1,300 fee-earning hours per year available to the normal lawyer. Today, by contrast, a major law firm pronounces with equal confidence that a quota of 2,400 billable hours, if properly manageable, or if properly managed, is not unreasonable, which is a euphemism for necessary for having a hope of making partner. Billing 2,400 hours requires working from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m., 6 days a week, without vacation or sick days every week of the year. Graduates of elite law schools join law firms that commonly require associates and even partners to work 60, 80, and even 100-hour weeks. Lawyers, because they must track billable hours in 6-minute intervals, record an experience that all top workers share. Elite finance workers once kept banker's hours, originally named for the 10 to 3 business day, fixed by banks from the 19th century through the mid-20th and later used to refer more generally to any light work. Elite managers, for their part, worked as organization men, cocooned by lifelong employment in a corporate hierarchy that rewarded seniority above performance. Today, investment bankers work 17 hours a day, 7 days a week, in the words of one, until midnight or 1 a.m. every night. 1 a.m. every night, including weekends, full-day weekends, and then probably pulling an all-nighter every week or every other week, in the words of another. Similarly, the organization man has given way to what the Harvard Business Review calls the extreme job, a job that involves physical presence at the workplace for at least 10 hours a day. a large amount of travel, availability to clients 24/7, work-related events outside of regular work hours, and an inordinate scope of responsibility that amounts to more than one job. The work histories of law, finance, and management all reflect a broader trend. They do not report exceptions, but rather illustrate a new rule governing housework. Governing elite work, More than half of the richest 1% of households now include someone who works over 50 hours per week, which is over 15 times the rate among the poorest fifth of households. Overall, prime-aged men from the top 1% of the income distribution work nearly 50% longer hours, on average, than their counterparts from the bottom half. Elite jobs of all sorts nowadays demand hours, routinely, as a matter of course, that would have been thought unimaginable, because degrading by an earlier, more genteel American elite. For centuries, the old order imposed a social taint on those who worked not from passion, for honor and exploit, or as a calling, but industriously for wages. But that stigma, which remained at mid-century, has today been entirely erased and even reversed. Elite workers across all fields now valorize long hours and conspicuously and almost compulsively publicize their immense industry, including through their habits of speech, as a way of asserting their status. Meritocracy makes effortful and industrious work, busyness, into a sign of being valued and needed, the badge of honor. Elite training, skill, and industry yield income as well as status. First-year associates at top law firms in New York and other big cities today earn about $200,000 per year, and effectively every Yale Law graduate who seriously seeks such a job gets one. Moreover, elite lawyers' incomes grow markedly greater still as their careers mature. A law firm now exists that generates profits per partner exceeding $5 million annually, and more than 70 firms now generate more than $1 million of profits per partner every year. Partnerships at these firms are overwhelmingly dominated by graduates of elite law schools. Over half of partners at the 5 most profitable firms are graduates of law schools conventionally ranked in the top 10, and 4/5 of the partners at the $5 million per partner firm graduated from law schools conventionally ranked in the top 5. Specialist doctors, professional finance sector workers, management consultants, and elite managers all also require elite degrees and again generally make several $100,000 a year. Incomes exceeding $1 million are startlingly common in all these fields. And the really top earners, managing directors at investment banks, C-suite executives at large corporations, and the highest paid hedge fund managers, take home tens or hundreds of million dollars a year. As in law, the top employers overwhelmingly hire graduates of the very top schools, sometimes literally just Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, Yale, and perhaps MIT and Williams. Often, they do not even recruit new workers anywhere else. The economic returns to schooling have consequently skyrocketed in recent decades, and, especially at elite schools and colleges, double or even triple the returns to investments in stocks or bonds. This produces an astonishing segmentation of income by education. In industry after industry, the labor market now fetishizes the skills that meritocratic education produces, so that super-skilled workers dominate production. At the same time, mid-skilled workers become redundant. In some cases, middle-class employment never recovers. Mid-skilled manufacturing, retail, and middle management jobs have notoriously disappeared. In other cases, a new work order segregates subordinate and superordinate workers. Mid-skilled community bankers have been replaced by subordinate clerks on Main Street and superordinate speculators on Wall Street. Some of the newly subordinate workers even supply the booming market for personal services provided to rich households, whose members now work such long hours and command such high wages as to make it almost unreasonable for them to do their own chores. Either way, innovation increasingly divides work into what might be called gloomy and glossy jobs. Gloomy because they offer neither immediate reward nor hope for promotion, and glossy because their shine comes from income and status rather than meaningful work. As meritocracy advances, and more middling jobs give way to gloomy and glossy ones, the lion's share become gloomy. Meritocracy's shadow, cast over mid-skilled work, accounts for the darkness that engulfs gloomy jobs today, and its brassy light gives glossy jobs a false sheen. The meritocratic culture of industry helps to prop up the intense work effort required when a society concentrates economic production on a narrow elite. An unprecedented inequality. Meritocracy's two components, having developed together, now interact as expressions of a single integrated whole. Elaborate elite education produces superordinate workers who possess a powerful work ethic and exceptional skills. These workers then induce a transformation in the labor market that favors their own elite skills and at the same time dominate the lucrative new jobs that the transformation creates. Together, these two transformations idle mid-skilled workers and engage the new elite, making it both enormously productive and extravagantly paid. The spoils of victory grow in tandem with the intensity of meritocratic competition. Indeed, the top 1% of earners, and even the top 1/10 of 1%, today owe perhaps 2/3 or even 3/4 of their total incomes to their labor, and therefore substantially to their education. The new elite then invests its income in yet more elaborate education for its children, and the cycle continues. The sum total of elite training in industry and of the elite labor income that meritocracy sustains is absolutely immense. Meritocracy makes economic inequality overall dramatically worse today than in the past, and shockingly worse in America than in other rich countries. The top 1% of households now captures about 1/5 of total income, and the top 1/10 of 1% captures about 1/10 of total income. This means that the richest household out of every 100 captures as much income as 20 average earners combined, and the richest out of every 1,000 captures as much income as 100 average earners combined. Compared to the period between 1950 and 1970, this roughly doubles the share owned by the top 1% and triples the share owned by the top 1/10 of 1%. Moreover, in spite of common complaints that capital increasingly dominates economic life, between 2/3 and 3/4 of these increases in fact come from growing elite labor incomes, from the massive paydays to superordinate workers just described. Rising economic inequality, that is, principally, comes not from a shift of income away from labor and toward capital, but rather from a shift of income away from middle-class labor and toward superordinate labor. When they get big enough, differences in degree become differences in kind. At the middle of the last century, the economic distribution in the United States broadly resembled that in other rich democracies, including Canada, Japan, and Norway. Today, income inequality in the United States exceeds that in India, Morocco, Indonesia, Iran, Ukraine, and Vietnam. These national data accumulate local conditions, and narrowing the focus renders general statistics distressingly tangible. Fairfield County, Connecticut, for example, suffers greater economic inequality than Bangkok, Thailand. America has become an economy and a society constituted by meritocracy, implemented through an unprecedented complex of competition, assessment, achievement, and reward, all centered around training and labor. This state of affairs, an immensely unequal economic order in which the richest person out of every 1,000 nevertheless overwhelmingly works for a living, has no precedent anywhere or any time across all of human experience. Seduced by merit. A powerful instinct nevertheless defends these inequalities. Early moral victories against birthright privilege, combined with the new elite's raw skills and vast energies, make it hard to quarrel with the idea that advantage should track effort and talent. Certainly, this is better than the aristocratic worship of bloodlines that meritocracy displaced. Even in the face of rising discontent over the society that it has built, meritocracy itself retains an excellent reputation. Meritocracy's champions develop these intuitions. They insist that grades and test scores measure students' academic achievements, that wages track workers' output, and that both processes align private advantage and the public interest. Meritocratic practices reinforce these associations. Entire professions, educational testing, compensation consulting, work to improve and to ratify the connections. In these ways, meritocracy makes industry, effort, and skill converted into economic and social product, into the measure of advantage. These connections enabled the meritocratic revolution to push aside dull, sluggish, and inert aristocrats, to open the elite to anyone who is ambitious and talented, and to arouse the superordinate workers whose vigor and dynamism now light up the culture and drive the economy forward. Meritocracy, according to this view, promotes widespread prosperity. The enormous productivity of the meritocratic elite ensures that even if the rich do better under meritocratic inequality, the rest still do well. Moreover, meritocracy further ensures that advantage tracks desert. I don't really know what this means. The first time I read this, I wasn't really sure what this meant. I still don't really know what it means. This might be a typo. Or maybe not. Maybe there's a fifth definition of desert that I don't know. Superordinate workers owe their huge incomes to their immense industry. Indeed, the triumphalist view proposes meritocracy transforms inequality itself to reconstitute its moral character. Meritocratic inequality therefore arises without either deprivation or abuse, whereas aristocratic inequality was both wasteful and unjust. Meritocratic inequality declares itself at once efficient and just. Until the financial crisis of 2007-2008 unsettled meritocratic self-regard, one or another version of this triumphalism ruled the ideological field, effectively unopposed by any substantial critics or even skeptics. Even today, critical voices remain muted, or at least distorted and defanged, by meritocratic triumphalism's enduring power. Meritocracy disguises its external effects and inner logics, and its institutions and rituals, universities, graduations, consolidate the disguise. Meritocratic practice projects meritocratic ideas onto everyday existence to build the settings in which people live and narrate their lives and the fixed points around which their life stories revolve. Meritocracy lives through experience and not just logic, capturing the imaginations and limiting the critical faculties of those embedded in it. Indeed, meritocratic ideology and meritocratic inequality rise in tandem and drive each other forward, much as an immune system might select for more and more resistant parasites, which in turn render it increasingly indispensable. The disguise makes meritocracy, which is in fact contingent, recent, and novel, seem necessary, natural, and inevitable. Meritocracy wrongfoots critics of inequality by making itself appear inescapable, assuming all the powers of a tyranny of no alternatives. Even critics of the rising economic inequality that meritocracy produces refrain from attacking meritocracy itself. One common complaint, which figures prominently in popular politics on both the left and the right, alleges that the rich do not in fact owe their incomes to merit at all, but rather to nepotism and opportunism, to legacies of old-fashioned aristocracy. According to this view, elite schools and universities admit students based on cultural capital, class background, or legacy status rather than intelligence or academic ability. Elite employers hire based on social networks and pedigree rather than skill or talent, and superordinate workers command their immense incomes through rent-seeking or outright fraud. A second familiar criticism, developed in great detail by Thomas Piketty, attributes increasing economic inequality to a shift of income away from labor and in favor of capital, and in the extreme to rising oligarchy. According to this view, economic and political forces are reconcentrating wealth, redistributing income to both become more capital intensive and more concentrated at the top, and by these means rebuilding an old-fashioned rentier elite as the economically and politically dominant caste in a 21st century version of patrimonial capitalism. Both arguments attack the current elite's meritocratic bona fides. They reproach inequality for departing from the meritocracy, and they implicitly cast more and better meritocracy as the solution to economic injustice. The most prominent critics of economic inequality, no less than those who celebrate current economic arrangements, therefore capitulate to meritocracy's charisma, expressing rather than rejecting meritocratic commitments. Meritocracy has become the shared frame in which conventional disagreements about economic inequality play out, dominant dogma of the age. Meritocracy, that is, has become the present era's literal common sense. This state of affairs arises directly out of meritocracy's nature. To begin with, economic inequality in itself, inequality without deprivation, is hard to condemn without seeming a scold. As long as the middle class has enough, what is wrong with the elites having more, especially if it owes its great fortune to equally great industry? To complain smacks of envy. Charges of fraud, nepotism, and patrimonial capitalism give the case against inequality a more seemly face. They name clear wrongs and confer an aura of moral seriousness on economic inequality's critics. Moral outrage then acquires a life of its own, and this makes accounts that emphasize economic inequality's meritocratic roots in elite training, effort, and skill appear unduly sympathetic to the rich, unduly complacent about the world, and even quietist. What does that mean, quietist? Define quietist. Quietism. In the Christian faith, devotional contemplation and abandonment of the will as a form of religious mysticism. Calm acceptance of things as they are without attempts to resist or change them. Okay, that's the one this means, I think. So let's read that in context again. Where is that quietism? Why can't I find the word? Wait a second. Quietist. That's right. Quietist, not quietism. Moral outrage then acquires a life of its own, and this makes accounts that emphasize economic inequalities and meritocratic roots in elite training, effort, and skill appear unduly sympathetic to the rich, unduly complacent about the world, and even quietist. Commonplace objections to rising inequality also conveniently absolve their principal constituencies of primary responsibility for it. The intellectuals and other professional elites who advance these objections may belong to the 1%, but they can take comfort in telling themselves that they are neither fraudsters nor aristocratic rentiers. Complaints about gratuitous self-dealing and resurgent patrimonial capitalism allow superordinate workers to condemn economic inequalities from which they benefit without really questioning either their own income and status or the meritocratic system that secures both. Elites can say that the problem lies not with them, but with others, and they can cast themselves as innocent bystanders to inequalities that they sincerely regret. They may shout their condemnations from the rooftops without ever admitting complicity or accepting responsibility or abandoning any commitments essential to their own survival. Indeed, focusing attention on the private vices of bad actors and conspicuously distancing itself from these vices only burnishes the broader elite's meritocratic luster. Nevertheless, the common view romanticizes much and conceals more. Although the moral wrongs that conventional complaints emphasize are real, these corruptions operate on the margins of the meritocratic regime. Fraud, rent-seeking, and this resurgence of capital make real contributions to rising inequality, and diatribes against them denounce real targets. But the dominant causes of inequality lie elsewhere, inside meritocracy itself, and therefore on ground that inequality's main critics find less congenial. The selection processes for elite schools and jobs do include nepotism, but they remain overwhelmingly driven by achievement and skill, which is to say by good faith judgments of merit. The intensive training that rich parents give their children produces massive achievement gaps, so that meritocratic admissions themselves skew student bodies dramatically towards wealth. And the meritocratic elite can produce dynasties even without nepotism. Indeed, this effect is so powerful that the students at the top schools can become wealthier even as the admissions process becomes more meritocratic and the size of the legacy preference declines. Universities, rightly condemned for the legacy preferences they deploy, make it difficult precisely to quantify nepotism's effects on their student bodies. But an example illustrates how powerfully merit can dominate nepotism in producing a skew to wealth among elite students. Yale Law School, facing meritocratic pressures, including to maintain the sky-high LSAT scores on which the school's ranking depends, has ended its practice of giving children of alumni an extra point in the scoring system that it uses to rank applicants. Nevertheless, the student body includes as many, and in some years, even more students from households in the top 1% of the income distribution than from the entire bottom half. Similarly, although elite incomes do swell on account of self-dealing, they remain overwhelmingly driven by elite industry. A bank might gain millions of dollars in fees from sharp or misleading practices, as when Goldman Sachs, in a deal called Abacus that the Securities and Exchange Commission declared fraudulent, received $15 million for marketing asset-backed securities without disclosing that one of the portfolio's principal architects, the hedge fund manager John Paulson, was betting against them. But these gains pale before Goldman's total earnings, which amount to billions of dollars. More generally, while fraud accounts for billions of dollars of elite income, rising top income shares amount to trillions of dollars. Overall, the elite's income growth remains principally driven by massive increases in performance-related pay. Finally, although capital is seizing income share away from labor, perhaps 3/4 of the increase in the 1%'s income share comes from shifts of income within labor, as stagnant median wages co-evolve with exploding wages for superordinate workers. Some specific instances of this pattern, for example, that large firm CEOs were paid about 20 times a typical production worker's income in the mid-1960s, but are paid 300 times as much today, are well known. But incomes across industries have followed the same trend. A cardiologist earned perhaps 4 times a nurse's salary in the mid-1960s, and more than 7 times as much in 2017. Profits per partner at elite law firms have grown from less than 5 times the secretary's salary in the mid-1960s to over 40 times as much today. The change is perhaps most dramatic in finance. David Rockefeller received a salary of about $1.6 million in 2015 dollars when he became chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank in 1969, which amounted to roughly 50 times a typical bank teller's income. Last year, Jamie Dimon, who runs JP Morgan Chase today, received a total compensation of $29.5 million, which is over 1,000 times as much as today's banks pay typical tellers. All told, nearly 1 million workers do the superordinate jobs described earlier and capture the enormous wages that these jobs pay. And rising economic inequality mostly stems not from capital's increasing dominance over labor, but rather from these superordinate workers' increasing dominance over middle-class workers. Rising inequality is not driven principally by villains, and moralistic attacks on bad actors neglect morally complex but massively more consequential structural wrongs. Indeed, the commonplace objections to rising economic inequality undermine themselves. When critics embrace meritocracy in principle, they ensure their own impotence and in fact buttress the inequality they purport to condemn. Moralists are the real trivializers, and only arguments that undermine rising inequality's meritocratic bona fides confront the true depth and breadth of the problem. Meritocracy is not the solution to rising inequality, but rather its root. Meritocracy's inner logic has become undemocratic and opposed to economic equality. Even when meritocracy operates precisely as advertised, it promotes the dynastic succession of status and wealth and turns a ratchet that increases economic inequality. Ordinarily decent people, responding reasonably to economic and social forces that they do not control and cannot escape, produce outcomes from which very few people benefit, and that still fewer celebrate. The central tragedy of the age reflects meritocracy's triumph. Meritocracy, not by betraying its ideals, but rather by realizing them, imposes a caste order that equality's champions should condemn. In combating inequality, it requires resisting the meritocratic ideal itself. Whew. There you go. That's chapter 1. Thanks for watching or listening. Have a great day.